In this episode of Property Journal, I'm talking to Roger Black. The former athlete competed at the highest level for 14 years and won 15 medals in major competitions, both individual and in team events. A key part of Roger's career was overcoming injury and adversity, and how he went about doing that, building a resilience and a positive mindset. This is something that undoubtedly gave him an edge, particularly when he wasn't able to physically train. It's also something he's become very highly successful and highly regarded for in motivational speaking, inspiring others through his lived experiences. I can't wait to talk to Roger. Yeah, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure.
Let's start with, who is Roger Black?
Yeah, I mean, who am I? Yes, I'm a retired athlete, Olympic athlete, best known for that. Now I'm sort of a father of three. I suppose entrepreneur, I've never worked for anybody. So, have a few businesses that I run, and ranging from Roger Black Fitness, which is my fitness business with bikes, treadmills or whatever, to speaking business. I've made most of my living in the corporate speaking place. I run a business with a guy called Steve Backley, who used to be a javelin thrower, I always do that. So, I mean, everything I do is based around performance, and it's based around the world that I lived in. Living in the world of athletics was something that is very different to the real world, I would say, in not similar in many ways, but the big difference, of course, is that as an athlete, you were only judged on one thing, which was performance, and it was clear. You knew the day, the time, the place of the Olympic final. You come first, they'll give you a gold medal. Come second, they give you a silver medal. And that clarity was something that we took for granted. But the thing, all the work I do now in every field I work in is built out of a fascination that I lived through, which is the difference between talent and performance, that gap between talent and performance, which I had to, every athlete has to work out. You've got a certain amount of talent, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to stand on the Olympic rostrum. And so everything I do is around performance, helping people improve, whether it's physically or emotionally or mentally. Because I guess that's the bit that I did and the bit I enjoyed. And for me as an athlete, the physical stuff didn't interest me. I wasn't into the training. I wasn't into the physical benefits of being an athlete at all. It didn't cross my mind. I'm much more aware of it now.
Yes. But
when I was an athlete, the bit I got was that the people that are serial winners, or the people that come back from adversity, the people that the household names we would all know in sport, they weren't. It wasn't just that they were the most talented. It was the psychological challenge of performing at that level, which, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was. One, fascinated me, and two, I enjoyed that challenge, the psychological challenge. Yeah. Whether that was competing at a championship, which is very different to sort of training, or very different to competing in a race that doesn't really matter. Or whether it was just, the tips, the techniques of, not what you did on the track, but the stuff you did off the track. So I was an athlete. I started in 1985, finished 1998, and back then, the late 80s, sports psychology didn't really exist. I mean, there was one person in the UK that you heard about, a guy called Brian Miller, is an Aussie, and so I sourced him out. He gave me some tips, but it wasn't like it is now. Athletes now have there's so much material. You can have too much of something, by the way. So I was interested in it, and I had to source it out because I had injuries quite early on, and if you can't do much physically, you've got to work it out mentally. But a lot of my contemporaries at the time sort of poo-pooed it, really. Yeah. I mean, one of the greatest athletes ever, a guy called Daley Thompson, who I trained with, two-time Olympic champion, a massive influence on my career. When I was struggling and sort of, we were in America and we were in a car one day, we were driving from somewhere to somewhere, and I was getting into visualization, which I think is the number one skill. Yeah, I think it's
like manifesting.
Absolutely. Okay. If an athlete says to me, what are the things I have to do to get the best out of myself? I would say there are two things. If we're going to simplify it, there are two things. Firstly, if you want to run fast, just go and run with fast people. There you go. Simple as that sounds.
Faster than you.
Well, you don't know how good you are until you go in with good people. So, I mean, I was the fastest at school, but I had no idea I was good enough to go to the Olympics. It's not until you actually run with Olympians you find out, actually, do you know what? I'm actually, or you either go, I'm nothing like as good as them, or in my case, you go, actually, I think I might be able to catch them.
Yeah.
So if you want to run fast, run with fast people. And the second thing I would always say to people, master the art of visualization. And I mastered it, absolutely. And I was fascinated
What
by
age are you at that point?
I'd broken my foot. I was coming back from breaking my foot. So I was having to, I didn't know what the future would hold, and I couldn't do much physically, but I could imagine myself running fast. I could see I could see it. So I started consciously visualizing at the age of 21, 20.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I'd won the Commonwealth Games, the European Championships, British record holder. I'd never visualized at all, didn't have to.
So,
I'll come back to my Daly story.
Yeah.
So I was saying to Daly, the greatest athlete of his generation, I was saying, visualization, Daly, do you do it? And he said, well, that's a load of rubbish. He said, that's just rubbish, Rog, just get on with it, all that stuff. And I remember saying to him, I said, so you don't ever see yourself competing against your opponents. You don't ever see yourself throwing and jumping. You don't ever imagine it. And he paused and he turned to me and said, I do it every minute of the day. So he was doing it without putting a label on it. He was naturally seeing himself compete, train at the best. It was a natural thing for him. It was something he didn't have to call it visualization. He just did it. Most of us had to learn it.
No, it's interesting. I was going to ask you
Yeah.
about the fact that with the broken foot, which probably was a very negative moment because you suddenly physically can't do it, whether that almost heightened the desire
100%.
to be right. Would you have done it if not,
No.
do you think?
No. So very briefly, I fell into athletics because I messed up my A-levels.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah. But my early career in athletics, I'm an example of a kid who was born with a lot of talent, but you don't know how good you are until you put yourself in the right environment. So
Sure.
It wasn't until I joined Southampton Athletics Club and trained with the likes of Chris Akabusi and a guy called Todd Bennett that I suddenly realised I was more than just talented. I could catch these guys.
Yeah.
And very quickly for me, so this was the end of 84. By 85, I was European Junior Champion. By 86, I was Senior Commonwealth Champion, European Champion, British record holder, British Athlete of the Year. I was 20 years old. And it all sounds great, but really, I didn't know what I was doing. I was young, I was fit, I was talented, I was healthy. And I I just ran. I didn't even know how to run the 400. I just ran. And that's all great. And then the following year, I broke my foot. Because obviously I was an ex-rugby player who my body wasn't able to deal with it. My body is terrible actually. But so I was out of the sport for just over 2 years with a broken foot. So it forced me to see things differently physically and to get my body sorted. But it forced me I realised very quickly that if I was to come back, it was no longer going to be easy again. It was never going to be ever as easy as it had been. And that there was far more to performance than just the physical talent and health. And that I would have to really understand the psychology of performance and understand my body better because I knew it could not do what had come so easily ever again. If I hadn't broken my foot, I would not have had to do it. But I'm not alone. Every sports person who has a serious injury does this. And you find out who you are. You find out how important it is to you.
Yep.
Because when it's taken away from you, you suddenly think, well, hang on a minute. And the worst thing for me was I'd turn on the telly and there were athletes that I was beating the year before who were winning the world championships.
Yeah, but that spurred you on.
And there were British athletes who were coming through you get forgotten very quickly. And so, you have to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And my whole career was that was like that. It was constantly never taking it for granted, never assuming it will happen, knowing that you're one injury away from it being over.
Yeah.
And actually gratitude, actually being grateful that I had a shot at it. I was given what we call the ticket to the party, as everyone who goes to the Olympics was, by the way. I had enough talent to have a go at the Olympics. Most people don't. It's not a case of anyone can do it. Not in sport, it's cruel. You have to have a degree of talent, but it's not enough. It's not always the most talented who will win. Some people have a golden ticket, the Usain Bolts, the Michael Johnsons, but it's still, don't be fooled. Yeah. Behind the scenes, they're one injury away.
Yeah.
And
or as good as your last race.
Yeah. So breaking my foot changed my life. it made me realise that this is not going to be easy, and I've got to take it seriously now and work it out. And no one's going to do it for me. And that was the other thing. Because coming back to your question, back then, it wasn't there for you. The system wasn't there. You had to make it happen.
Yeah. You were ahead of your time, because I know from I think I'm 45, so
57.
Yeah, so I grew up with a guy who was identified as being incredibly good at golf.
Yeah,
and had a funny moment with him in Barbados at the bar. Tall South African guy, short Welsh guy, just talking golf.
Yeah.
And I got a bit fed up with it, and I said, "Not in just a bit of banter. Can we talk about something else?"
Yeah.
And they said, "You don't know who we are." And it was Ernie Els in Woosnam, and they said, "Your mate is beating us all day long. He's going to be incredible."
Yeah.
When it came to going pro, it's his mindset that let him down.
Yeah.
Slightly different to what we're talking about, but all related. It was the pressure. It was the pressure for making the cut for the British Open. I think he was 4 over, finished 3 under on the last hole. Just
it's a lot of things, and that isn't. I don't think that is something like talent that you're born with. Talent is a very physical thing. From the moment I could run at school, I was significantly faster than everyone at school. There are kids all over the world who have got talent.
Yeah.
But the mindset you can learn. Yeah. But a lot of it depends who you surround yourself with. And I really think I was fortunate that I happened to be around. If you just surround yourself with the right people, it rubs off. Yeah. So if you're hanging out with Chris Akabusi, if you're hanging out with Daley Thompson, if you're hanging out with Edwin Moses, and then you're part of a group where everyone has a similar mindset, and then it just becomes your normality. Yeah. And I think it's something you can learn from a book, but you can learn it from other people. And I think that's the same whether it's in sport or whether it's in business. Yeah. And it's not that, if you imagine what it's like when you come into sport, you're a kid, you come in, this is everybody, and you've seen people on telly and suddenly you're competing with them. Yeah. And then you start to beat them. And it isn't that you become like them. I don't think you become like them. I think what it is that they normalise, they become like you. You realise that they're just normal people who just happen to have an extraordinary talent. Yeah. And when you normalise something, it becomes a lot easier to go, actually, I can do this. So that's what happened to me. I mean, there's no doubt.
Do you think you recognised that at the time, or more so looking back?
Oh, of course, looking back. Yeah. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. I mean, I look back now, and I look back at some of the races and some of the experiences now, and I can piece it together and understand what was happening. When you're in it, you're in it. I didn't have that perception of it at the time.
What you would have had, though, is an amazing sense of camaraderie and teammates, which shows from all the footage that I've seen and watching it live at the time, cheering you guys on. Yeah. And what you achieved. And we must talk about what you've achieved. Am I right in saying it's 15 medals across all the competitions?
The major championships, I think. Yeah. I love the championships. Ultimately, it was all about the championships. Okay. There were no prizes for running a British record on a hot night in Zurich. No. And then 3 weeks later, bombing out of the Olympic final. Yeah. It was...
Puts pressure on certain periods of time in your life. The guys that get injured a month before the Olympics.
No, so an Olympian's mind works in 4-year cycles. Yeah. The day, the time, the place of the Olympics. I sit here now. If you ask a British athlete or any athlete now, they'll know the Olympic final in Paris next year. I mean, it's simple as that. So everything leads to that. But of course, in between that, you've got the World Championships, which when I started was every 4 years and then became every 2 years. You've got Commonwealth Games and European Championships. There's always something to aim for, and sports people love that. We like to have something to aim for. Yeah. And you're right. Yeah, I mean, you can do everything right, and then Michael Johnson in Barcelona got food poisoning 2 days before the first round of the 200 metres. I mean, anything can happen. Yeah. I suffer from migraine. I never woke up. I ran with a migraine, but never in a championship. I always thought, what if I wake up in the morning with a migraine?
Hopefully that was your body dialed into it and said, don't do it. Don't sabotage me.
So stuff can happen. And I think you're always walking on eggshells as an athlete. You're conscious that you're one trip away from injury. But you can't think like that. I mean, you
yeah, but it's in the back of your mind, isn't it?
It's there.
But then your mind, the way you have gone about your own mindset probably means that was just, you had such a focus compared to other people might have let that overwhelm them.
Yeah, but the focus, I mean, I come back to, whenever anyone ever asks me about my career, the name Chris Akabusi will always be there, because he was my greatest influence and I was his greatest influence. We lived together, we trained together, we every goal, it was all together until he retired. But when you have someone else with you on that very rare journey, every step of the way, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
So you're not alone. That's really important. So that's why I say to people, find other people to train with, because it's not just the physical. It's because there's a language, there's an understanding you can only have from someone who's in that space doing it.
No,
and you learn off each other without even knowing you're learning. You make decisions together that maybe I wouldn't have made on my own. So it was a very special time. It was a very special time.
We'll come back to it, but just because you've gone into that detail, that's something you've carried on. That mentality and finding people that you can work with and so on, and you carried that on into.
Well, that's my awareness. I know myself relatively well.
Yeah,
I'm not very good on that.
No, okay, but where
that's
you now?
Why I didn't do athletics as a kid. So you imagine I'm a kid at school we had athletics clubs knocking on my parents' door, saying this is a crime that this child is not running for Portsmouth or Fareham or Southampton. I didn't want to do it because none of my mates did it.
Interesting.
And I played rugby, quite well. I played football quite well. I played cricket badly.
Yeah.
I played tennis doubles. There's a clue.
Yeah.
So I was a kid who was always happier. I wasn't someone who liked to be in the.
Yeah.
I didn't. I liked. I would hide behind my teammates. I was just happier in a team.
So what was the catalyst that got you into?
Well, the catalyst was I wasn't going to do athletics. I was going to be a doctor. I mean, to put it into context, my last year of sixth form at Portsmouth Grammar School, I would run the school sports every year. I would run the Hampshire Championships every year from the age of 11. I would always win it. And if you win the Hampshire Championships, you go to the English Schools Championships, which is a big deal as a kid. I only went 2 or 3 times, and I made the final, but I was like 5th or 6th, okay? But in the sixth form, I got selected for the English Schools Championships, but I was a gentleman of Japan in the Mikado with 2 other mates, because we were doing music as a sort of mess around subject.
Sure.
And I chose to be a gentleman in Japan in the Mikado than go and run at the English Schools Championships. That puts it into context. It just wasn't, but I had no concept of how good I knew I was good, but I didn't know I was Olympic good.
No way of measuring it.
And also, my life was grammar school, education, blank, blank, so university doctor, and I messed up my maths A level. So I was going to go to Bart's Hospital and read medicine. I had to get 3 Bs back in those days. I got an A in biology, which is pretty good. I got a B in chemistry, pretty good. I got a D in maths. I got rejected. I've still got it. I've still got a piece of paper. Found it the other day, actually. Devastated. And it was the best day of my life, because it meant I had to take a year off to retake that exam.
Interesting.
And that's when a mate of mine, who was a high jumper for Hampshire, said, "You have no idea how good you are. Now you've got no excuse. Go and join Southampton Athletics Club and find out how good you are."
Wow.
With him. And 2 months later, I was running for Great Britain.
So that and the broken foot. No, I think it's amazing.
And the broken foot came 2 years after.
But my point about that and the broken foot is there's 2 things that went against you. They didn't go how you wanted them to. That actually probably massively guided you into the career that you took.
And shaped my life. Now, my wife would say to me, "See, once again, you weren't proactive. You reacted to something that happened to you. She's got a point."
Yeah.
But it's meant that we all have. Doesn't matter who you are. Everyone has ups and downs, and and I'm not a super positive person. Okay.
I was going to ask you. You come across as it.
I'm not. In my private life, I'm not. I'm quite anxious and I'm quite worried. However, but I was shaped by what happened to me there, because there's one thing I do have, is that because of my life pivoted, because I messed up an A level, I always ask myself a question, no matter what happens to me in my life, what's good about this? Because once you've had an experience like that, you sometimes have to go, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Find the positive.
Yeah, and you may not be obvious.
No.
And I'm not saying it's easy. Oh, well, I messed up again. But actually, and I think a lot of sports people are wired like that. I think they process it and then they just move on. They don't reflect back that much. They don't dwell, because you're always going forward.
Yeah.
And that's a really great thing when it comes to high performance. It is a challenge as well, because it doesn't make you a particularly rounded functioning human being, which is why you're very good in structured environments. But it's a bigger discussion. There's a pro and a con to that. But fortunately for me, without even knowing it, I was wired to be a championship performer, and I didn't know it.
And actually, moving forward from running, going into what's become a career, part of your career, where you did motivational,
a lot of different things. Yeah,
you carried that through. So that mindset that you learned there. One thing though, being an athlete is a young man's career. Yeah. At what point did you start to have that feeling of, actually, do you know what, I'm going to retire at some point, and I've got to be thinking about what I'm doing next?
I can tell you the moment. I know the exact moment. My mind changed. I know the exact moment it changed. So I had one. Every year you have goals, but I had one all-consuming dream.
Right.
It's not going to surprise you. It's the same that all athletes have at some point, which is, well, it should be, I want to win the Olympic gold medal. Yeah. But actually, it was, I want to stand on the Olympic rostrum. Because in my event, the 400 metres, no British male athlete had done that since the film Chariots of Fire, a long time ago. It's tough event. All events are tough, but the 400, British athlete, no one's done it since, by the way. And I think a guy called Matthew Hutton-Smith will, but I'm proud of that. And I missed the 88 Olympic Games with a broken foot, didn't go. Went to Barcelona in 92. I always had a problem with my hip and my hamstring. It was pretty sore. I didn't make the Olympic final. So 1996 was my last chance. And in 1996, I won Olympic silver medal behind Michael Johnson, who was a different league. So for me, it was no doubt. I mean, I could easily not have medalled. So, that was it. So the moment was I stood on the Olympic rostrum, got my medal. And people often say, what are the emotion? What was your emotion there? And there were lots of emotion, but there was one overriding emotion when I stood on top of the Olympic rostrum. I felt complete.
Interesting.
Totally complete. Because I knew, because my career had been, I was getting on a bit and I'd had a lot of setbacks and injuries. I knew it was never going to get better than this. I knew there was nothing more. There was nothing more for me to aim for. And the moment I stepped off the Olympic rostrum, I started to think about what I'd do after. I started to cut corners, not in a big way. I was never that focused again because I was complete.
Your mind was...
And I'm so fortunate to have had that. And I had it towards the end of my career, because a lot of people, they have the great early days and they spend their whole career trying to get back to it. Yeah. And I'm one of the, and Chris Akabusi we talk about this a lot, and Kelly Holmes is a great example. Very fortunate if your best day is towards the end of your career, because it's much easier to move on after that.
That's so interesting. What would you say is your greatest strength?
My greatest strength, I think, as an athlete, my greatest strength was the ability to focus when it mattered, to know what really matters when it came to performance. I'm not a details person. I never have been, never will be. I'm not. I know that, and I'm not proud of that. But in some ways, that was an advantage, because you can overanalyze stuff. But I'm quite good at simplifying things to the basic ingredients of what really matter.
What do you think your greatest weakness is?
I don't have good. I'm sort of contradicting what I said. I can focus intensely, but I can't hold focus for a long time.
Okay, interesting.
So I can lose. Yeah, and I'm more aware of that now than I ever have been before, because it's just, I'm not alone. Lots of people like that. I'm not very good at seeing things through. I'm not very good at that in focus. I do distract.
So you've got the success that you've clearly had in the athletics career. You've been successful in business. You continue to be successful in business. But how do you define success?
What is success for me? I think there are two levels for that for me. I think one of the challenges of being an athlete is you live in such an uncertain world. So you didn't have a salary, you didn't know what you were going to. So for me, stability. This is going to sound really boring, but for me, success is stability. Feeling stable. Mm-hmm. There comes a point where you're just a bit tired of the uncertainty of, are you going to get a gig? Are you doing this and the other? So for me, from a business point of view, I haven't achieved that. But it's relative. I don't feel I have. Just to feel that, there's enough. There's a regular rather than you need the next gig and this, that, the other.
Chasing it.
Yeah.
Wondering when it's going to happen.
Yeah. So I think I would say I don't feel that I'm there yet, but I feel successful, but I don't feel there.
Yeah. Well, Roger, thank you. I've learnt loads. You've been awesome to talk to.
Thank you.